With Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 9 done in the books, there's something that I want to bring to you guys' attention that stood out from the last manga chapter that I did find to be a bit interesting as I went through the chapter. Interesting in a very good way because of the potential conflict that it represents for the story moving forward. While Boruto himself wasn't in the chapter for a super long period of time, there was a rather interesting setup for the future conflict of his character that puts him at a crossroads moving forward with the decision that he's gonna have to make, and the weight of said decision is greater than I think a lot of people realize or truly appreciate, which is why in today's newest Naruto Explained video, I wanted to talk to you guys about Boruto's impossible choice and why either one being made is a heartbreaking betrayal. So after Boruto got the sonic rings knocked out of Kawaki and had the boy wheezing for air, we saw him flying off when he realized and Kashin Koji realized that Boruto's karma seal was resonating with Kawaki and Boruto needed to get away before things reached that critical point. And the reason why this is so important is that Boruto leaving the area during a time where his sister Himawari is being hunted down by Jura and Sarada was given new orders by Shikamaru to rush to their location because Sarada had previously been running towards where Boruto and Kawaki were, the front gates of the village in Old Town by the bookstore, and not too far from where the Konoha Jonin had been killed. Boruto might have distanced himself for Kawaki for the time being, and he's clearly waiting for that karma seal resonance to cool off. But while doing so, the story is setting up a potentially impossible choice for him to have to make a decision between saving Sarada and saving Himawari, and I'll explain to you why this is so heartbreaking before going into the weight for why it is going to be so impactful. Now, both of these girls, they represent something for Boruto in terms of an external conflict clashes that goes directly against the internal conflicts that spawn back from the very weight that comes from Boruto's past failures at the end of Boruto Naruto Next Generations and the flashback in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 5. Like the video that was uploaded yesterday that discusses the samurai elements of Boruto's broken sword and how it reflects Boruto's character on a deeper level and the weakness that it symbolizes, which goes into much further detail, and I'll leave that in the end credits of this video. But there's one important aspect, which is shame, that came from that moment, and it's why Boruto honoring his promise to Sasuke to protect Sarada, it is such a big deal now, and it's going to be a big deal moving forward. She is about to face the Shinju clone of her father. Meanwhile, Boruto has his own duties as a big brother to Himawari, even if she doesn't remember him as her big brother. And while she might have had some shinobi training and she might have had the nine tails inside of her, what we've seen is that all the training in the world, it isn't enough to prepare someone who hasn't had real combat experience for true combat when there's another party that is out for your life, let alone a battle against someone like Jura who isn't even out to kill you in the traditional way. But instead, Jura has such a much lower win condition than a normal fight just based off of what we've seen, because he just needs to sink his teeth into you and he wins. That's a very tall task to ask for even the most experienced shinobi to fight someone with those win conditions. It's like asking a Ganny fresh out the academy, hey, your first battle, you got to go against Hidari, someone who only needs to secure a drop of your blood and he can set up his win condition to kill you. Or you need to go fight against a Rinnegan user who can use the human path to rip out your soul with a single touch, assuming of course you aren't strong enough, which most people aren't, to put up a resistance like we saw KCM1 Naruto do against Nagato. But you get the point that's being made. Those are impossible odds, impossible scenarios for a first fight, and that's what Himawari is facing right now. If you're Boruto, this becomes an impossible choice, because if you are forced to choose, one side is going to be betrayed. If you choose your duty to your family, your younger sister who you were forced to leave behind during an emotionally traumatizing period of her life where everyone told her that both of her parents were dead, where she now has to grow up as an orphan with no parents and a brother who isn't really her brother, and you couldn't be there as her real big brother to do what your natural instincts are, which is to protect her, to comfort her, and to guide her the same way that you tried to do when you protected her from Damon. You dishonor your family if you don't choose Himawari to go after and protect her and get her to safety, especially if she isn't yet capable, which she isn't, of protecting herself properly against an enemy that you have more intel about. If you choose your duty to your master, to use the sword that you took from him to protect his daughter, his final wish to you was literally protect my child, look after her for me. In exchange, he was giving up his life so that you could escape. Following those samurai elements, especially when it concerned Sasuke, someone whose character for the entirety of Naruto's manga was deeply rooted in samurai aspects. You dishonor the sacrifice of your master by not going to her during that battle that is going to potentially throw her off, because the face that is looking back at her looks so much like her father, and that face has a body that fights like her father, even using her father's techniques. The likelihood of Sarada's yin chakra, which is your spiritual chakra, getting thrown out of sync, it makes sense because that is an emotionally jarring situation. It only takes one moment of freezing because of an ice cold grip on your emotions that it has on you to change a winnable battle into an unwinnable battle with insurmountable odds because of the dreaded mental nerf. Classic examples of this being how Minato went from being an absolute monster at the early part of the 4th Ninja War to when he found out that Obito was the guy who ripped the Nine Tails out his wife and tried to kill Minato, tried to kill Kushina. The 4th Naruto databook tells us that Minato suffered a mental nerf until Naruto was able to cheer Minato up and knock him out of his funk. Another example being the anime version of the Hiruzen versus Orochimaru fight, where the 3rd Hokage was strongly implied to have a mental nerf against Orochimaru, since we see in the anime that Hiruzen had been picturing Orochimaru as a small child the entire time in his mind, with some of his last images being the constant switching back and forth between the current Orochimaru and Orochimaru as a child, which you can argue that was happening the entire fight. Loyalty to one's family at the risk of dishonoring the final request of one's master versus loyalty to one's master at the risk of dishonoring one's duty to one's family. In Japanese culture, especially samurai culture, that is huge. It's a great set of conflict because both enemies facing Sarada and Hidari, they are strong enough that Boruto can't really afford to use the shadow clone to go off. Shadow clones, they split the chakra proportionally in an even manner by the number of clones that are used. Can Boruto at 50% fight off Jura and Hidari without using his Karma Seal? Something the narrative has showed us that he is yet to use in battle during this part of the story. And the one time he did have his Karma activate, he ran off in fear before it finished forming. I personally love what we're seeing here. Boruto potentially having to choose which of them he's going to back up, because the moment that Sarada arrives on the battlefield, Hidari stands to reason to shift from sitting by idly watching Jura as he's on his side quest to capture Himawari, to devour her, to suddenly he's having his own side quest that is calling out to him because his target that was calling to him and speaking to his soul, it was Sarada. There's a really good chance that those battles, they start out and they get going, and as this happens, the battlefield positions are going to change. Sarada and Class Rep, they might be standing side by side with Team 10 and Himawari at the start when they show up, offering reinforcements, but when the fighting resumes, they're going to get separated, and that's where the conflict has so much more room to grow for Boruto's character. These are enemies too powerful to use shadow clones, and running away, it isn't really an option, because even if the village is in a situation where it wants to kill Boruto, Boruto still feels a duty to protect the village from harm, even having to do so from the shadows with everyone wanting to kill him. He's in the Itachi position, which is exactly what Boruto wanted. Be careful what you ask for. He's not leaving the village without either using the flying Raijin to teleport away those two attackers, or being certain that they will follow him. And against enemies this strong, who only need to bite you in order to secure a victory, getting close enough to initiate contact with that jutsu is already a problem. But the fact that there's another claw grind that is running around the outskirts of the village means that Hidari and Jura, they have another way back into the village, so teleporting is absolutely pointless. It's a tough spot for Boruto to be in. I personally believe that if it does come down to it, Boruto would choose his sister Himawari, if for no other reason than the fact that he would choose to trust in his own strength of his teammate Sarada, who is also the daughter of his sensei Sasuke. He trusts in her being able to stay alive long enough to get his sister to safety, and it is worth mentioning Boruto does not know that Himawari has been undergoing shinobi training, unless he's been told off screen, and there's no indication that this was ever the case. And Boruto has been made aware that there is some connection between Himawari and the Nine Tails, so that tips things even further into him going after Himawari, because there's an additional set of questions that surrounds his sister he needs to get answers to. I just find this so fascinating because the story of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, as it continues onward, we are seeing a very, very effective way of writing a character like Boruto that I don't think gets appreciated enough. I really don't, because while there are still some who have swallowed their pride, previous detractors of Boruto, and they said, hey, Boruto, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what I was led to believe by social media. Because newsflash, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, even YouTube, it is an echo chamber. And there's a lot of groupthink that goes into the anime community, for better or for worse. There are still a lot of people who are stuck in 2017 when the anime first came out, and they are reusing the same talking points that were made in 2018 that no longer apply and have not applied for a while, because they were complaints about the start of Boruto's character arc that started in the first arc of the manga itself, which that makes it impossible to judge a product properly. But that's common sense. But again, common sense ain't that common. We got introduced to Boruto coming out of this time skip as this unstoppable mega Chad. He had this amazing aura. His first debut in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex is this dude carrying out one of the most disrespectful flexes in modern shonen. He's stepping on Code's face and stepping in particular on the scar that Sasuke gave to Code. That is super disrespectful. He's toying around with a beyond Jigen level threat. He's talking a big game against Code, saying you can't fix stupid, and then he's going on to say I don't want to have to kill you if I can help it. And then right after that, he shows that he's mastered the flying Raijin, the jutsu of his grandfather, and he's now able to perform it very skillfully. Granted, he says he's not as good as his grandfather, but people ain't ready for the conversation, the fact that his grandfather couldn't teleport to another dimension, but that's another video for another day. So we see him and he's begging Code for help against the Shinju, and Boruto was putting forth more effort than ever before fighting the Shinju, and we learn that he has trauma that came from losing Sasuke and the circumstances behind how he lost Sasuke. And now we see more fear in the form that Boruto is freaking out at his karma still resonating with Kawaki, and Kawaki coming to the conclusion that Boruto still cannot control karma on his own. We're watching a seemingly invincible character, super strong in base, show gradual chinks in his armor, but it's one chunk at a time because of how the narrative is layering his internal conflicts and his external conflicts. And longtime viewers of the channel, you guys have heard me say repeatedly, you judge good writing by how a character has an internal conflict and whether or not the narrative is able to create external conflicts that directly play and clash against the internal conflicts. Now, when you add in this potential situation, it's adding another chink to his armor, one that his own grandfather learned all too well when it came to being a master of the flying Raijin. Minato, he could be anywhere, any place at the blink of an eye, as long as he's marked that location. Yet, he was seemingly late multiple times in the franchise when it mattered the most. He took down an entire shinobi army on his own, but got to Obito and Rin and Kakashi too late, and Obito went flat splat when he played Hide the Boulder. He was off on another mission later on in the Third Ninja War, but got to Kakashi too late after Kakashi penetrated Rin in the way that she never wanted or expected. He saved his son, but he got to his wife too late after the Nine Tails was extracted from her. The fastest man alive, and yet he was seemingly never on time. Is that Boruto's fate with the flying Raijin? Will he end up like his grandfather Minato? Will his legacy be somewhat similar to Minato's, which this video on the left breaks down, and the video on the right is the Boruto and Sasuke video that I mentioned earlier at the start of this video?